Get down on your knees and scrub this floor right now if you want to sleep under my roof tonight. That was the absolute first thing my father violently screamed the second I stepped foot into the living room. There was no casual hello, no opportunity for an explanation, just pure, unadulterated venom launched directly at me like I wasn't his biological daughter, but rather some disgusting unwanted burden he was forced to endure. My mother immediately laughed at his demand. It was a sharp, incredibly cold sound that sliced straight down my spine like a razor blade. My entitled sister-in-law's Amber stood proudly behind them with her arms smugly folded across her chest, smirking aggressively like she personally owned the entire property. My name is Lauren Parker, I am 29 years old, and up until that horrific night, I still naively believed that my toxic family's cruelty actually had some kind of limit. But I was spectacularly wrong. They had simply been patiently waiting for the absolute perfect moment to completely break my spirit. The entire nightmare started when Amber intentionally spilled dark juice all over my clean work uniform early that morning. Then she immediately ran to my parents and viciously lied, claiming that I had aggressively snapped at her for no reason. I absolutely didn't. I barely speak a single word to that woman unless it is strictly necessary for survival. But my narcissistic father clearly didn't care about the actual truth. Amber effortlessly cried pathetic, fake crocodile tears. My mother rushed to comfort her, and suddenly I was universally branded as the ultimate villain of the household. So when my father viciously yelled, "Until you get down and properly apologize to your sister-in-law, you will live in this house exactly like a servant," and my own mother laughed at my humiliation, I felt something deep inside me go completely, terrifyingly still. I wasn't emotionally broken, and I certainly wasn't defeated. I was just absolutely still. Their cruel eyes eagerly waited for me to violently explode, to aggressively defend my character, to start a massive screaming match, but I utterly refused to give them exactly what they desperately wanted. My voice came out incredibly steady, painfully calm, and devoid of any emotion. "All right," I simply said. Deep inside, my tight chest burned like holy fire. Profound shame, boiling anger, and staggering disbelief were all rapidly melting together into something incredibly sharp and dangerously focused. Dad aggressively pointed directly to the hardwood floor with the tip of his expensive shoe. "Good. You can start with that mess right there, and absolutely do not expect any breakfast tomorrow morning." Amber leaned in close, whispering maliciously, "That is a very smart choice, servant girl." I didn't even flinch. I absolutely didn't kneel. I certainly didn't clean the floor. I just slowly turned around, walked directly to my small bedroom, and pulled the heavy door shut behind me as quietly and deliberately as if I were permanently sealing a bank vault. The exact moment the metal latch clicked shut, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to fight, and I was absolutely not going to beg for basic human dignity from miserable people who never genuinely valued mine to begin with. That specific night, while they all slept incredibly comfortably under the very roof I actively helped pay for, I meticulously packed my bags with the cold, calculated precision of someone quietly preparing for a massive war. When the sun finally rose the next morning, my room was completely empty. And downstairs, my mother's piercing scream violently echoed through the entire house, exactly as the heavy front door swung wildly open, and the frantic family lawyer rushed inside, physically trembling with panic. "Ma'am," he desperately gasped, gripping a thick manila folder to his chest. "What on earth have you done?" My mother's loud scream didn't actually come from genuine fear. It came strictly from deeply insulted pride, acting like she literally couldn't believe I actually dared to remove myself from their toxic control without submitting a formal request for their permission. I could almost hear her angrily pacing the long hallway, venomously hissing my name, fully expecting me to magically materialize the exact moment. She snapped her privileged fingers. Instead, she found my dresser drawer entirely empty, my closet completely cleared out, my bed stripped down to the bare mattress, simply gone, entirely silent, and fiercely unapologetic. But the real, soul-crushing panic didn't officially begin until the flustered family lawyer stepped right into the center of the living room, nervously clutching his legal papers exactly like a live bomb, fully ready to detonate their entire reality. But before we get to that explosive moment, you really need to understand exactly how we got here in the first place, how I actively became this family's default emotional punching bag. Growing up in that house, my older brother Ethan was always the undisputed golden child. He wasn't just casually favored, he was practically worshipped. He had straight A's, he was a star athlete, incredibly handsome, effortlessly charismatic. He was the absolute full package. My parents explicitly treated him exactly like a high-yield financial investment that would one day pay off massively. I was always considered the good daughter, but I was simply never good enough to actually shine brightly next to his blinding perfection. When Ethan eventually married Amber, the blatant favoritism instantly mutated into an absolute circus. She immediately became their brand new queen. Her casual word was absolute law. Her fake tears were treated as divine tragedy. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, I slowly became the designated household servant. It started incredibly subtle at first. Lauren, please set the dinner table. Lauren, properly iron Ethan's work shirts. Lauren, watch their energetic dog for the weekend. But gradually, the casual commands violently sharpened, their tone grew increasingly hardened. The daily expectations massively ballooned until my entire existence felt exactly like an endless, grueling chore list, written by ungrateful people who literally never once said thank you. Things drastically escalated to a toxic level right after I temporarily moved back home for a few short months to desperately save some money. What was explicitly supposed to be a temporary living arrangement quickly mutated into an inescapable trap. Amber casually moved in just for a short while, falsely claiming that massive renovations were being done at her own place. But mysteriously, those supposed renovations seemingly never ended. Suddenly, absolutely everything I touched in the house was entirely wrong. Every quiet silence was immediately labeled as blatant disrespect. Every single breath I took was aggressively criticized as having an attitude. But last night, that psychotic outburst, that vicious command to get on my knees and live exactly like a servant, that was the absolute final line in the sand, the definitive final slap to whatever tiny shred of hope I still foolishly harbored for this family. So yes, I finally left them behind. And exactly while my entitled parents were loudly discovering my entirely empty room, I was already miles and miles away, sitting quietly in a small, empty diner booth with a cheap cup of stale black coffee and taking the very first deep breath of absolute freedom I had actually tasted in years. My packed overnight bag was resting safely beside me. My cell phone was completely powered off. I fully expected them to throw a massive panic attack, but I absolutely didn't expect the frantic lawyer, or the thick folder he nervously carried, or the devastating words he was mere seconds away from unleashing on their perfect world. As I sat peacefully in that quiet diner, silently watching the heavy rain streak down the glass window, I finally powered my phone back on, and it immediately buzzed back to life. It wasn't flooded with frantic missed calls, there were simply far too many of those to even accurately count, but it lit up with a single, highly demanding text message from my furious mother. "Come back home right this instant. You clearly don't understand what you've done." I just stared at the screen, deeply confused, but absolutely not concerned in the slightest. What catastrophic thing could I have possibly done simply by leaving? I wasn't their legal property. I wasn't legally required to stay in that toxic house. I wasn't even the one actively causing the conflict, but then a brand new message urgently came through, this time from a completely unknown number. "Miss Parker, this is Attorney Harris. Please contact my office immediately regarding your parents' home." My stomach instantly tightened into a knot. What on earth did their precious home have to do with me? That exact question was already rapidly unraveling inside my parents' tense living room as Attorney Harris stood there, physically trembling. My furious father was aggressively pacing the floor exactly like a caged animal. My mother was descending into full hysterics, and Amber was tightly gripping Ethan's arm exactly as if she were desperately bracing for a massive physical impact. What exactly did she steal? My father aggressively barked at the lawyer. "Tell me right now she didn't touch anything inside the wall safe." "She absolutely didn't take anything at all," the flustered lawyer stammered defensively. "That is not the issue here." "Then what the hell is the issue?" Amber viciously snapped. "Why are you standing here at 7 in the morning? "We are currently dealing with a massive family crisis." She ran away in the middle of the night like a spoiled brat. The lawyer firmly cut her off, nervously clearing his throat. "This has absolutely nothing to do with Lauren's personal behavior. This is strictly about the legal status of the house." My father instantly froze mid-step, his face turning pale. "What about the house?" Harris slowly opened the heavy folder. "Exactly 6 years ago, when you originally refinanced this property, your declared income did not meet the bank's updated strict financial requirements. They legally needed a secondary financial contributor to sign on. According to these binding documents, you explicitly listed Lauren as a legal co-owner. Amber's smug face completely drained of all color. My father's jaw moved up and down, but absolutely no words came out of his mouth. My mother violently clutched her chest, exactly like someone had just physically punched her. Ethan was the very first one to actually speak. That is legally impossible. Why on earth would she be listed on the actual deed? She explicitly earned the qualifying income at that specific time, Harris explained nervously. The bank strictly required it. Without her signature, the mortgage would absolutely never have been approved. A heavy silence fell, rapidly followed by pure, unadulterated panic. My father violently flung his hands up in the air. So, just because she threw a tantrum and stomped out like a massive child, the bank is going to do what? Forcefully take the house? It is significantly worse than that, the lawyer whispered gravely. Any major household financial decisions now legally require her direct signature, explicitly including the massive refinancing deal you had fully planned to execute next week. Absolute shock violently rippled through the entire room. Back in the quiet diner, my cell phone buzzed aggressively again. My furious dad was calling, and this time I calmly decided to answer it. My father didn't even bother to say hello. The exact moment I picked up the line, his voice violently exploded through the tiny speaker, raw, panicked, and furious. Lauren, get your selfish ass back to this house right now. Do you have absolutely any idea what you have just done? I held the phone incredibly calmly between my fingers, blankly staring at the diner's flickering neon sign, reflecting brightly in my black coffee. What exactly I've done? I asked incredibly softly. Dad, I literally just packed my bags and left the house. That is all. That is absolutely not all, he viciously barked back. Without your signature, the massive refinancing deal absolutely cannot go through. We desperately need this approved by Friday afternoon. You have successfully jeopardized absolutely everything we built. And exactly there it was. There was absolutely no worry for my safety. There was zero genuine concern for my well-being. There was no love, just pure obsession with money, control, and personal benefit. Amber's shrill, panicky voice suddenly shrieked loudly in the background. Put her on speaker! Put her on speaker right now, Tom! My dad must have instantly obeyed her command because the very next thing I heard was a chaotic chorus of frantic, aggressively overlapping voices. Amber, you are actively ruining all of our lives right now. My mom, Lauren, please stop being so ridiculously dramatic and just come back here. Ethan, just sign the damn legal papers and get this over with. My dad, this beautiful house is our family legacy. Don't you dare try to walk away from us. Their selfish demands violently crashed over each other exactly like a massive wave of pure entitlement. It was so incredibly loud I actually had to hold the phone an inch away from my ear. I actively felt the tension rapidly rising inside my chest. It wasn't fear and it certainly wasn't guilt, but rather a freezing, rapidly expanding clarity. Oh, I clearly see now, I murmured smoothly. So now, suddenly my existence actually matters to you people. Do not get smart with. Amber viciously snapped back. You are only listed on that deed because they generously helped you when you were broke. The absolute least you can do to repay them is sign the paper. I laughed incredibly quietly, a deeply bitter sound. Amber, you have treated me exactly like a literal servant for months on end. That is exactly because you act like one. She aggressively shot back without missing a beat. For a brief moment, the ambient noise of the diner completely faded away. The entire world faded away. Absolutely everything inside me violently cracked wide open. My voice came out completely level, terrifyingly level. So, let me get this entire situation straight. You want me to actively drive back to the exact house you all deeply humiliated me in? You want me to sincerely apologize to the toxic woman who intentionally spilled juice on me and then viciously lied about it? And you want me to blindly sign a financial document just so you can all keep living incredibly comfortably while I continue to be treated exactly like a burden? Ethan aggressively finished my thought. Just come back home, Lauren. Stop being so incredibly childish. Childish. That specific word sliced significantly deeper than any actual insult could. I inhaled a slow, deep breath. Dad, deliberately turn the lawyer toward the phone right now. What? Why? My dad demanded defensively. Because I desperately want him to hear me incredibly clearly. There was a brief, chaotic shuffle on their end. I leaned closely into the microphone, ensuring every single syllable was razor sharp. I am absolutely not signing a single thing. A collective, horrified gasp violently tore through the living room on their end, and then the line went absolutely, terrifyingly dead silent. The heavy silence on the phone wasn't peaceful in the slightest. It was incredibly violent, heavily suffocating, exactly like absolutely everyone on the other end had suddenly completely forgotten how to breathe. Then my dad's furious voice finally returned, but this specific time it wasn't loud or screaming. It was incredibly low, tightly controlled, and highly dangerous. "Laufen," he said slowly. "Do not make a massive mistake that you cannot possibly take back." I didn't respond to his threat at all. I just sat there watching the hot steam rise from my fresh cup of coffee, actively feeling a remarkably strange calm completely settle inside me, exactly like a massive storm quietly pulling back into the ocean right before it brutally wipes out an entire coastal city. Because for the very first time in my entire adult life, their empty threats didn't move me an inch. Their aggressive guilt-tripping didn't pierce my armor. Their constant disappointment absolutely didn't own me anymore. I was absolutely not the weak, powerless daughter they had meticulously conditioned me to be. "I will call you all back later," I simply said, and then I calmly hung up the phone. For a long moment I just sat there and breathed. My hands visibly trembled, but absolutely not from fear. It was entirely from the massive weight of genuine freedom finally landing squarely on my skin. But a deep pain still lingered right beneath it. A very real, deeply aching pain. I vividly thought about the horrific night before. My dad aggressively barking orders at me exactly like I was hired help. My mom cruelly laughing at my deep humiliation. Amber smugly telling me I acted exactly like a servant. Ethan blindly echoing her cruelty. Absolutely all of the small daily cruelties. All of the heavily swallowed words. All of the quiet, lonely nights I cried myself to sleep in my room but still woke up incredibly early just to help them. And now, the exact second they desperately realized they actually needed something from me, they all suddenly desperately wanted me back. But absolutely not as a loved daughter, strictly as a legal signature. I slowly ran my thumb along the chipped edge of my ceramic coffee mug, fully realizing they absolutely weren't worried about me at all. They were strictly worried about keeping the house. And that massive house, their ultimate shrine, their pride, their glowing trophy, had a binding legal chain tied directly around my neck. That meant I officially had leverage. Massive, real leverage. This wasn't going to be petty revenge. There would be no skaslashed, there would be no slashed tires or childish tantrums. This was going to be highly strategic revenge. Perfectly clean, surgically precise, and devastatingly final. So, I calmly found a quiet, isolated corner of the diner, popped open my laptop, and systematically pulled up absolutely every legal document securely tied to the house. My name glared back at me in bold black letters right on the official deed. Co-owner. Equal decision-maker. Without my explicit legal approval, absolutely nothing moved. A massive plan instantly formed in my head, incredibly sharp and highly elegant. I absolutely wouldn't destroy them. I would simply legally remove myself in a highly specific way that aggressively forced them to face the exact life they built entirely without me. A life that suddenly legally couldn't function at all. And by the exact time they finally realized what was actually happening, it would already be exponentially too late. True revenge didn't simply start with the aggressive slam of a door or a highly dramatic screaming declaration. It officially started with a simple email, a perfectly calm, highly professional, and utterly devastating email. I drafted it incredibly carefully, treating every single word exactly like a sharpened blade aimed directly at Attorney Harris. Subject: co-owner legal decision. After incredibly thoughtful consideration, I, Lauren Parker, explicitly declined to authorize any refinancing or financial restructuring whatsoever of the property officially located at 118 Brookshire Lane. Please formally inform all involved parties that any unauthorized attempt to proceed without my explicit legal consent will be heavily considered fraud and addressed legally accordingly. I meticulously reread it twice, ensuring every single detail was legally airtight, and then I confidently hit send. The massive weight of it, the absolute power of it, settled warmly in my chest, exactly like solid steel. Next, I actively took another step. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't strictly vengeful, it was simply legally necessary. I directly contacted the mortgage bank. "Hi," I said, incredibly sweetly to the agent. "I am calling to officially place a strict co-owner freeze on the property. There are to be no transactions, absolutely no refinancing, no equity withdrawals, strictly nothing approved unless I am physically present with my government ID." The representative verified my details and confirmed it. Just exactly like that, the beautiful house, my parents' beloved palace, Amber's stolen kingdom, Ethan's entire inheritance was legally locked down tight. No signatures, no money, no control, and they had absolutely no idea. Well, not quite yet. By noon, my cell phone was violently vibrating non-stop. There were 20 missed calls from Dad, 11 from Mom, 9 from Ethan, and 5 from Amber. Even though she aggressively blocked her caller ID number each time, like that would magically fool me, I absolutely didn't answer a single one of them. Instead, I peacefully drove to my brand new temporary apartment, which was small, incredibly quiet, and entirely mine. I gently set my heavy bags down on the floor, fully opened the blinds, and let the warm sunlight completely wash the absolute last pieces of residual guilt right off my shoulders. Then, the incredibly brutal second phase of my master plan officially began. I carefully drafted another highly detailed email, but this specific time it was sent directly to the local HOA board. I will absolutely no longer be financially contributing to any property repairs, home improvements, or shared association costs until highly specific cohabitation violations are legally addressed. I explicitly listed every single HOA violation. Amber's entirely unauthorized residency, my parents' highly illegal subletting activity, and massively unreported occupancy changes, all of which they had incredibly smugly ignored for years. All of which I suddenly had the absolute legal authority to aggressively report. Within exactly 30 minutes, the HOA board actually Thank you for informing us. An immediate compliance investigation will be initiated. Absolutely perfect. Then, just exactly when I thought the entire day couldn't possibly get any more incredibly poetic, my phone buzzed aggressively again. But this time it was with an incoming video call. It was Dad. I almost hit decline, but a deep instinct told me to absolutely answer it. His furious face aggressively appeared on my screen. He was beet red, furious, and visibly sweating. "Lauren," he viciously growled. "What exactly did you do?" Right behind him, Amber was loudly crying. Ethan was angrily yelling. My mom looked incredibly pale and sick. I comfortably leaned back in my chair, my expression entirely calm. "Oh," I said incredibly softly. "We are only just getting started." His eyes violently widened in terror. And exactly at that moment is when someone knocked incredibly loudly on their front door. The aggressive knock on their door violently echoed through the audio of the video call, sharp, highly official, and completely unmistakable. My dad's head violently whipped toward the sound, his red face tightening further. "Who the hell is that?" he angrily snapped at absolutely no one in particular. Right behind him, Amber completely froze mid-sob. Ethan nervously muttered, "No, no, no, no. This absolutely cannot be happening right now." While my mom aggressively clutched the couched arm exactly like she physically needed it to stay upright, there was another massive knock. It was significantly louder and much more insistent. "Open up right now! HOA official compliance inspection!" The remaining color completely drained from Amber's fake face so incredibly forced glass it was almost impressive to watch. My dad viciously hissed into the phone. "Lauren, what the hell did you do?" I slightly tilted my head, actively keeping my voice maddeningly calm. "I honestly didn't do anything illegal. I just formally informed the HOA board about the massive irregularities going on. You know exactly what I mean. The illegal occupancy, the entirely unregistered tenants, the blatant misuse of the property, just the usual stuff." "You little," he aggressively started to scream, but the heavy front door violently burst open before he could even finish his insult. A stern pair of uniformed HO officers stepped firmly inside. Clutching metal clipboards, their voices clipped loud and highly professional. "Mr. Parker, we have officially received highly credible reports of massive violations regarding entirely unauthorized residents and massively unapproved property modifications. We legally need full access to the home right now." Amber completely panicked instantly. "Etlight? We are literally family." One officer slowly raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Ma'am, according to our strict legal records, you were absolutely never approved to live here." "That is a massive direct violation of Section 4B. Ethan desperately tried to physically intervene. "This is completely insane. You guys cannot just barge in here." "Step aside immediately, sir," the lead officer commanded sternly. "We have already officially issued a formal warning. Your continued failure to fully comply could instantly result in massive financial fines or severe legal action." My mom frantically sputtered. "This absolutely must be a huge misunderstanding. Lauren is completely lying. She is desperately trying to ruin us." The officer casually flipped a page on his clipboard. "Actually, Miss Parker explicitly sent extensive legal documentation complete with timestamps, verified dates, and fully signed statements. Absolutely everything checks out perfectly. Their horrified heads violently snapped back toward the phone screen, glaring directly at me. Amber's voice was piercingly shrill. Why on earth would you actually do this to us? I smiled incredibly faintly. Because you explicitly told me to get on my knees and live exactly like a servant. Because you all cruelly laughed when I was deeply humiliated in my own home. Because you only miraculously remembered my existence when you desperately needed my legal signature. My dad violently lunged for the phone, his face completely twisted with pure rage. You honestly think you are punishing us? You are actively punishing yourself. If this massive house goes under, you completely lose out too. No, I corrected incredibly quietly. I actively walked away. You are the exact one still legally chained to it. Just exactly then, one of the officers loudly called out from deep down the hallway, Mr. Parker, can you please come here right now? We just found something incredibly concerning. The entire living room instantly fell dead silent. Even through the digital screen, I deeply felt the massive shift. Something incredibly big, something wildly unexpected, something they were absolutely not prepared for had just happened. Concerning? My dad quietly echoed, his voice violently cracking in a pathetic way I had absolutely never heard before. The HOA officer urgently motioned him down the long hallway. Amber and Ethan blindly followed, exactly like terrified shadows trailing right after him. My mom stayed completely frozen on the couch, staring blankly at the phone screen exactly as if trying to magically will me back into total obedience. I stayed totally silent on the call, just watching the chaos unfold. The officer aggressively pushed open the heavy door to the dark basement storage room, a room I absolutely hadn't seen the inside of in years. The harsh light flicked on, thick dust swirled in the air, and then I saw it. A massive stack of entirely unopened letters, literally dozens of them, every single one explicitly addressed to me. My breath completely caught in my throat. The officer slowly lifted one up to the camera. These are highly official legal notices directly from the county. Ma'am, according to this paperwork, your daughter Lauren is legally entitled to a massive, life-changing inheritance directly from her late aunt. My mother's horrified gasp was incredibly loud and immediate. That is absolutely impossible. We literally never received anything. The officer aggressively cut her off. These highly official notices were explicitly mailed directly to this address. They were intentionally never opened. Based exactly on the official postmark timestamps, they are over 6 months old. 6 entire months, 6 torturous months they intentionally hid this massive secret from me. 6 months. They intentionally let me get on my knees to scrub their floors and iron their shirts and deeply swallow their daily insults while massive amounts of money, my legally inherited money, sat completely untouched in their filthy basement. Amber's shaking hand violently flew to cover her open mouth. Ethan nervously whispered, "Dad, what the hell did you do?" But his terrified eyes clearly said he absolutely already knew, because this was absolutely not a simple accident. My dad violently lunged forward to grab the letters, but the officer aggressively blocked his path. "Sir, this explicitly constitutes severe federal mail tampering and highly illegal withholding of binding legal documents." My dad's voice completely broke in panic. "She absolutely doesn't deserve it. We desperately needed it more. She was literally living here entirely for free." My mom sobbed uncontrollably, tightly grabbing his arm. "Just stop talking." My steady voice finally entered the chaotic room, incredibly low and deeply cutting. "So that is exactly why you kept me around. I wasn't actually family, I was strictly secret funding." All 4 of them violently turned toward the phone, exactly like I had physically stepped right into the room. I calmly continued my execution. The lawyer already contacted me earlier. The massive inheritance officially transfers completely directly into my personal accounts, and since I am the legal co-owner of that house, their faces violently twisted with absolute dread. "I am officially signing the entire house over," I said coldly. Amber jolted violently in shock. "To exactly who?" "Directly to the bank," I calmly replied. "A complete legal foreclosure is significantly cleaner than ever dealing with you toxic people again." My dad screamed in absolute agony. Ethan aggressively cursed at the ceiling. My mum violently collapsed into her chair. Amber sobbed completely hysterically. I calmly reached out and ended the call. Then I slowly walked out onto the sunny balcony of my brand new, fully paid-for apartment, breathed in the incredibly quiet morning air, and finally felt entirely free, truly unquestionably free.